you started to see construction kind of handed off as an alternative route. So it was almost positioned as a career or a profession that you fail into. When you promote going to college, a four-year university, and that becomes synonymous with a successful next step, anything outside of that begins to be something that is kind of second tier.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Paul Robinson. He's the founder and CEO of ConstructReach. ConstructReach is a workforce development consultancy that connects companies who are trying to attract young talent to their organizations, as well as perform the challenging community building to develop routes that those that are currently educating students in high school and beyond. Paul is from St. Louis and he attended Kansas State University, earning a Bachelor of Science in their construction management program. He then worked at Target and worked as a project manager and property development before launching ConstructReach about 7 years ago. Paul launched ConstructReach 7 years ago in a response to the retirement crisis and the need to attract a younger, diverse demographic for its overall sustainability of the construction industry. In this episode, we talk about attracting and developing talent. We talk about the DEI backlash that is well underway in our current cultural environment. We talk about the power within vulnerability and some best practices for working with family members as Paul works with his wife in ConstructReach. All of that and more. Please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Paul Robinson, CEO and founder of ConstructReach. Mr. Paul Robinson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Good, man. Appreciate you making time. We're going to start here. I want to go in the Wayback Machine. Okay. Paul Robinson, 12 years old, kind of going into sixth grade maybe. Maybe situate us geographically. Where were you? Maybe tell us a little about your family. And what was the 12-year-old Paul Robinson into? What were you passionate about at that time in your life?
Oh my gosh. So geographically, right smack dab in the middle of everything, both geographically and when I was 12. That's St. Louis, Missouri. Okay. So I was, in the sixth grade. Oh my gosh, it was sports. I was basketball through and through. Both of my parents played basketball. Father was a pastor, mother was an educator. So sixth grade, it was constantly conversations about life and then conversations about the importance of making sure that I stayed on top of my grades, right? And so for me, one of the things that was very interesting was it probably wasn't until I was in sixth grade where I didn't make the correlation between my father's height and what my height would be, right? So so when you asked me up until about sixth grade, hey, Paul, what do you want to do? It was playing the NBA. I want to be 6'6" like Michael Jordan. Right. Yes. And my dad started to ask me more often when I got to sixth grade, so P, what about if you don't make it? What else are you interested in? And so I finally asked him, I said, so why do you keep asking me, like, what else do I want to do? Don't you think I'm good enough? He's like, yeah, P, I mean, your skills are good. You get them from me, right? But I just want to know, what else are you interested in? Because you have all of these other gifts. You love to draw, you love to build things or what have you. You've got great insight. You like to design things. I'm just wondering what else piques your interest. And so, I think it was those questions that my dad started to ask from a very seasoned position in life, right? About just kind of understanding, for me to understand exactly what was it that, I wanted to do, and probably looking introspectively to see what were some things that I was gifted in, what was I interested in, and how that could possibly, if basketball didn't work out, kind of set the course for my life, and then kind of a little sooner than become an adult, just from an academic standpoint, what I would be interested in. And so, that was me, man. Very energetic, loved to play, was outside all the times. Video games weren't as popular as they are now, although they were popular, but a lot of the kids, we stayed outside until the lights came on. And so, I was out. And I think that kind of helped a lot as well with creativity, having to just create my own fun, playing with kids in the neighborhood or what have you, or classmates. And so, yeah, man, that was me at 12.
Okay. Well, you went to Kansas State University, which I've never been to Manhattan. However, I do know the K-State construction management program is really strong nationally. How were you drawn into that? And maybe just give a little context. What was your experience like in the construction management program there?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, of course, you would have conversations back and forth with your guidance counselor about, your school academics. But then also when you were getting to that point to where it was time to start looking for, college opportunities and what you would major in, we started having conversations. And actually, I did not know about Kansas State until my guidance counselor told me about it. And because I thought there was only one Manhattan, and that was in New York.
Right, yes.
And so I learned about the Little Apple, as we called it. But just being strong, I think, in math and science, that's where those first conversations started to come with my guidance counselor about the possibility of looking into engineering. And when I went to Kansas State, they kind of had this dual, if you will, program where it was architectural engineering and construction science management. And then, of course, you can kind of veer off and pick which side you wanted to go. And for me, that was very enticing. I think, it kind of aligned with what I was interested in, but also what I was gifted in as well. I always had an interest in buildings and kind of how they are structured and put together, but then also working collaboratively with other people and being able to be a part of teams that were able to accomplish something that was kind of larger than ourselves individually. And so that was essentially it. And when I got to Kansas State, the program was a very top, kind of a top program within the U.S., well-renowned, if you will. And so I definitely appreciated that, the exposure that we got to the industry prior to graduating, the strong emphasis on having internships throughout our entire tenure within that program, and then just the other, opportunities that the university provided in terms of leadership development and things of that nature. And so, I think from a college standpoint, the rigor that we had with our curriculum, being able to prioritize time, because of course, when you're in college, everything is, on your own. You may have a professor that mentions a syllabus a week before the school schedule and then never mentions it again, but the expectation is for you to deliver. So having to make sure that you were staying on top of, your assignments, prioritizing your time, being able to really understand kind of how to manage that and apply yourself so that you can get the most out of that experience, but put yourself in a position to have opportunities. I think that began to really put in the practical pieces to transition into my career in my early 20s. And so, yeah.
So what was the insight into ConstructReach and the opportunity there? Because the thing that really just caught my eye there, and I've heard probably like you, dozens, if not hundreds of stories of either a guidance counselor that said, well, your father's in construction and your grandfather was a home builder, and I know that. Have you considered construction management? Or the conversation that never happened. And they're like, I didn't even know construction management was a thing. I just know I didn't want to pour concrete and swing a hammer. Maybe tie that to what you're doing now, how you reach this next generation to make them aware of not only the compelling opportunity for career and growth, but also the desperate need that we have for talent to come from anywhere. So maybe give the audience a little bit of context to kind of jump forward in your progression to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so ConstructReach is about 7 years old. It definitely aligns with just kind of who I am and what I'm passionate about. I've always been passionate about being able to help others, and whether my life can be a testament or testimony to not going kind of in the direction that everybody else is, and being able to provide a tangible example of what it looks like to go maybe against the grain in certain environments, where there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of untapped potential, but you don't necessarily have the resources or sometimes the support, to accomplish those things that have this little desire to do. And so Construct Reach, when we look at kind of the landscape of things, first and foremost, at our most basic level, we are a workforce development consultancy, but we really pour into that younger generation. When you look at the labor shortage, when you look at the state of the industry, and just historically speaking, how construction has been introduced for the past couple of generations, where from an educational institution standpoint, when a lot of the construction started to be taken out of school, and getting our society and economy ready for the surge of tech, you started to see construction kind of handed off as an alternative route, right? So just say, if you had a young student that may not have gone to college, but they were still talking about or being introduced to opportunities. A lot of times that's where construction was being introduced. And so it was almost, positioned as a career or a profession that you fail into. Now, maybe not intentionally by the education institution, but when you promote going to college, a 4-year university, and that becomes synonymous with a successful next step, anything outside of that begins to be something that is kind of second tier. And so it's kind of hard to get young people excited and to have some sense of pride about that next step when everything has told them the right step should have been positioning yourself to go to college. And so, of course, now we're starting to see that with the emergence of CTE programs, which is career and technical education. You have the educational institutions starting to celebrate going straight into a career right on par with going into a 4-year university, which is the way that it should have always been, because you just have people that, they may not test well, or they may have the competency and are super smart, which is the reality, but just didn't have an interest in going to college. I think being able to provide that environment now and celebrate that, is something that's important. And that's what Construct Reach is about. We don't throw shade at going into college. What we like to do is make sure that this budding young adult understands what their options are.
Yeah.
And introduces them to a profession that they may know very little about, and show them the vast amount of opportunities that exist within that sector of business, and how they could have a unique gifting that allows for them to be very successful and also be fulfilled in pursuing that. And so we try to be very intentional about that, allowing them to explore what their options are, but then also affirming who they are. So I think that's very important, because we're all out here, trying to discover, hey, what our purpose is. Hey, I'm gifted for this, but what does that mean for the totality of my life? Young people they're the same as well. And so we try to make sure that we dignify them in that way, because, I'm sure somebody has done the same for us, or we've all appreciated seeing it being done for somebody else, and then what that led to. And so we just try to pay that forward. And then we also just try to help companies be intentional with what that looks like as well, and then making sure that they are ready, healthy enough to receive this younger demographic. And so, essentially that's kind of how Construct Reach works. We are very hands-on, boots on the ground, kind of grassroots in terms of building those relationships with educators and young people, and putting them in position to be able to make an informed decision, while simultaneously working within the confines of the industry and consulting the industry to make sure that they are in a position to not only attract, develop, but then also retain this young talent that they're in need of.
Yeah. Your sweatshirt, and it was really prominently detailed on your website as well, really emphasizing that term reachable. So as I'm looking, and says building reachable opportunities, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you guys really focus on, hey, reachable is kind of the key word there. Why is that?
It is. Reachable is the operative word, because I think a lot of times you can vision cast, or you can paint a picture, and you can talk about what somebody has the potential to do or what's available. But when you don't understand the audience, or you don't contextualize it in a way in which they understand how it applies to them exactly where they are in that moment, then you could miss them. And so something that could start out as exciting can become disappointing when a person feels like they can't achieve it, or they're left out of that vision. And so it's being able to say, hey, yes, there are jobs available. Yes, there are careers available. Yes, you could do this. But until I make that applicable for your life where you are, then I don't know if it's going to have that big of an effect on you. And so we make sure that those opportunities are reachable. That exposure is a lived experience. And so we try to make sure that we bring those opportunities to them. A lot of times when, we are introducing young people to careers and opportunities that exist within the construction industry, they don't have to come to us. So like, we come to them in the context of their community, with their schools and with their educators and with their friends, and talking to their community and their family, and highlighting a project that they are close to. I think it's bringing everything that this industry has to offer home and contextualizing it to where they are, so that they can understand how the dots are connected.
That really resonates with me, Paul, because we often have conversations that are essentially identical. They're just further up that career ladder, if you will, where folks land at a job. Through some way, they found their way to this company. They've been onboarded, and then to look around and said, is there any way for me to get up there? And has anyone ever developed a career path for someone like me? And then they'll say, actually, well, if you look around and you visit our website, the top 12 people at this organization are all over the age of 60, and they're all white guys. You are not over 60, and you're not a white guy. So it might be trouble. And they look around, and there's this disillusionment. Now, it might take a year or two for them to peter out, but we're just having lots of conversations with clients and friends in the industry. Just when we get talent of any age, wherever they come from, are we making it clear that we want to put you as high as you want to go? And let's talk about what that might look like, and give you options, and know that over time, your preferences and your skills and your talents and your expertise might change, but we both benefit from a long-term collaboration here. But so when I hear you say that, I'm like, oh, you're so right, because it's one thing to get young people excited about construction, but if they go back to their communities, or they go back to their home, or they go back to their school, or there's no follow-up, that energy can dissipate just as quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the foundational elements with starting ConstructReach, and then being able to establish community engagement in a way that is more programmatic and has more partnership and collaboration and alignment with the individuals or the industry partners that can actually make the opportunities happen, is because there are a lot of things that come into a community. Sometimes there are a lot of promises that are made and maybe well intentioned, but when you don't have the follow through, you got to think about who that affects. Sometimes when you're the one making the promise, you're kind of already in a position of maybe comfort. You have what you need, but you have to think about, okay, well, what does that mean for somebody who's attaching their goals, their hopes, their dreams to what I've just communicated? And if I don't follow through, how does that make me look? But then also, more importantly, where does that leave them? Right. And so for me, and a lot of times in under-resourced communities, that happens a lot. And so I think that was one of the non-negotiables from our company, and then with our partners, is to make sure that, hey, we understand we can't come in and make false promises. That's just something that I do not want to do, and we have to make sure that we're giving our all, and openly communicating and being honest with one another to make sure that we're able to deliver and provide opportunity, and make sure that we're putting them in a position to at least make an informed decision about what they can or what they cannot do within this industry.
Yeah, no, well said. I want to ask you about or introduce the idea of just DEI as a thing. I'll leave it at that for the moment. I'm going to give you two anecdotes, one recent and one flashing back to 2020 or so. So just recently, we've been getting more notes on these ads we run on Facebook for our construction Spanish or safety Spanish program. This is something we've been doing for 13 years, and our whole goal there is specific to construction. How do we bridge the English and Spanish language gap? I'm a tall, skinny ginger who speaks Spanish, try to make it fun and help people build safer and more profitably, right? And just recently, my team came to me and said, hey, we're seeing just more and more people that are commenting on the ads on Facebook. And I said, let me guess. It's not positive. I want to buy this sort of stuff. They're like, Bradley, it is not. And a lot of it is, many of them have simply been statements that this is a DEI ad. Full stop. And they're like, what should we say? And I'm like, nothing. We're not going to say anything. So this has just been kind of happening locally. I'm going to flash back to many of our clients we were working with. I don't want to say many, probably 3 or 4. We were getting calls, probably the early stages of 2020 in that time frame, and they're saying, Bradley, we have a large Hispanic demographic of craft workers who work for us, critical to us doing our jobs. We've been doing construction Spanish language training, helping Spanish speakers learn English speakers learn Spanish for several years. Bradley, can this qualify as a DEI initiative? And my response to that was, I don't know. But if you're asking me because this is what everybody's doing and this seems like something we should jump onto, that to me lacks authenticity, and I'm not an expert on that. Here's what I'm an expert on. So at this kind of rambling introduction, Paul, to a relatively simple question, you are someone who's a trusted expert for companies that say, hey, in our industry, we need more diverse talent. We do not want this to be more exclusive. And we want to make sure everything we do is equitable. I think all of those things are still the same. How have you been navigating, or maybe give some context to some of the conversations you've been having with leaders in this time where all of a sudden we've seen the polar opposite swing, where there is a divisive element to something that I think inherently long-term, all of us agree we need more of.
Yeah. No, that's a very good question because, and rightfully so. I mean, that's definitely something that is permeating our society. When you kind of look at 2020, post George Floyd, there was a lot of emphasis being put on making sure that opportunities were more equitable. And it's interesting because you had companies and organizations and leaders and C-suite individuals just kind of looking internally within not only their organizations, but also themselves and saying, okay, have I been part of the problem? How can I be part of the solution? And I think those are all good questions. One of the things that we always tell leaders is there's a power in being vulnerable. And sometimes you think you're kind of giving away the power, in the authority by being vulnerable. But people want to know that you have some commonality, you're thinking about certain things, you're struggling with certain things, and you need help in certain areas. Because that's the reality of it. And I think anytime you act like you don't, and the facade is there, I think that's where things become a little bit more problematic. But to go back to your point or to your question, we kind of saw how it was well received, right, back in 2020. And then, of course, you fast forward to where we are today. And now the same thing that we were all having very open and honest questions and conversation and dialogue about now is being under attack. Not by everybody, but they're starting to ask questions that's starting to, maybe disrupt jobs or affect certain positions that were put in place for good reason, to say, okay, well, now maybe I don't need that because I don't have to have it. Right. And so it all boils down to, okay, well, but what was your why to begin with? Right. Just like the questions that you were being asked. Hey, well, can this qualify now as DEI? Can I put this on my website? And it's okay, well, why do you want to put it on your website? And so I think it's getting back to the why. Like what reasons are you doing it for? Are you doing it because you understand that there does need to be more equitable opportunities across the board? And that, regardless of who you are, where you come from, and what you look like, we know that everybody has something, right? And so, like, if that's the position that you're operating from, then of course you're going to naturally flow into anything that looks and feels like DEI, because you are dignifying everybody, right? If that's not the case and you're looking for a way to maybe put your organization in the spotlight, or in sometimes in a negative sense, but we have to say it to check a box, then you have to start questioning the genuineness of that and the authenticity of that as well. And so, conversations that we're having, with the industry, and I think it takes a lot of intentionality to become a trusted source, because I couldn't come in just bashing everybody saying that they were 100% wrong. Right. Even a broke clock is right 2 times a day. And so I think you have to find something that you can affirm first within a person, because we're more alike than not alike. And so it's being able to find those points of commonality. And when you find them, it's being able to affirm that, but then also creating the rapport to where they feel comfortable being vulnerable and asking questions. And I think there's a lot of leaders that want because leaders are in a unique position. They want to maybe move forward. They want to be inclusive, but then they also want to make sure that others understand their decisions and are comfortable with their decisions at times to a certain extent. And so sometimes they feel like they are between a rock and a hard place, between what decisions to make. And so from my perspective, we just try to make sure that we understand, okay, what's your barrier? Do you want to make a move, or do you want to do things that creates equitable opportunities for everybody, but you struggle with the how, or you struggle with the communication, or you struggle with the plan to, maybe move your culture to a place to where that is more acceptable, then we can talk. And I think a lot of leaders sometimes are there. They just don't necessarily know the how. And maybe because they haven't had to do this before, sometimes they struggle with those specific tools to effectively communicate that throughout their organization. And so, whenever there are leaders that want to do the right thing, but just struggle with the how, I think that's where we're able to add the most value, and provide them the tools, the resources, the guidance, and the leadership to put them in a position to be strong leaders of change, and to lead in a very, profound way. And sometimes, we see leaders making moves through their convictions as they know it's the right thing. Employees may not understand in the beginning, but then eventually through that communication and modeling what they say, begin to see, okay, that's helped my perspective as well. Now I am a better person because of what my leader decided to do and how boldly they led, how authentic they were, but also kind of that servant leadership where they modeled exactly what they were trying to get me to see. And I think there's a great appreciation for that.
Yeah, and I just kind of come back to let's set the marketing aside. And is it possible that this 3-letter phrase, independent, we all like all of those things, our lived experience for, I think, most leaders would say diversity, equity, and inclusion, independent of themselves, are all good. Is it possible that for whatever reason, this has become kind of this umbrella that encapsulates a lot of things? But when you say, what's the number one constraint to you growing over the next 5 years? And almost unanimously, it's talent. And you said, okay, then maybe we don't even brand this. Maybe we don't market it. Let's just look about the most intelligent, authentic way that really speaks to your culture and how you've grown. In many cases, you know this, some of the guys and the leaders in our industry have been around for 100 years. You've adapted, you've evolved, you've found ways to attract and retain talent. We are now at kind of a fulcrum point where we need to change again. Are you open to looking at all different ways to do that? Yes. Great. Let's talk to Paul. Let's talk to Bradley. Let's talk to whoever, right? But I think sometimes we get caught up, and I think some of the companies, whether it's John Deere or Tractor Supply or companies that have ran the opposite way and denounced DEI in their corporation. Now they're publicly traded companies, but I would say it's also because you probably rushed in a little too fast. And at the end of the day, I think we all need to say, this is how we're going to choose to run our organization and how we can get the most talent possible. If we all agree on that, hey, now you can choose to do whatever you want. But I think rushing in because all the cool kids are doing it and then retreating because we're getting pressure from this organization, it's going to be tough on employees first and foremost, but certainly your clients. So I appreciate you giving context there. I didn't want our entire conversation to revolve around that, but I know it is something that is top of mind for a lot of leaders. Before we move on from this, Paul, any coda or anything you want to say to kind of wrap this up before we kind of move on?
No, I think back to your point. When you think about where the industry is, this younger demographic that the industry is in need of for its overall sustainability. I mean, you just kind of put this in perspective. Within the next 7 years, 40% of the workforce is expected to retire. So that translates to roughly 4 million open positions. That's a lot, especially when you think about an industry that has so much demand and work that is set to be accomplished. There's a huge need to backfill those positions. And we're not backfilling them at the same rate that people are transitioning out. And so when you just look at that, there's a need for young talent. And then you couple that with this younger demographic being the most diverse that it has ever been. Okay, well, now you're like, okay, in order for our sustainability, the business case is, yes, we have to get younger. And when we take that into account, that it's the most diverse that it has ever been, well, we need to make sure that there are cultures that are conducive to their success, to a minority's success. That is very important. That's without putting, to your point, a label on it. That's just looking at the numbers. That's looking at the state of the industry, and that's looking at the generation that the industry is in need of, and saying, okay, how do we make sure we're able to attract that talent, develop that talent, and retain that talent, and benefit from what that talent has to offer? We've got to make sure that we take all of those things into account.
Yeah. I try not to always combine sports and business, but sometimes I can't help myself. But if there's a GM in the NBA who said, you know what, Paul, we don't really want any talent from Eastern Europe anymore. Why? Well, it's just, no one would do that. What are they saying? They're like, I don't care where they come from. I don't care how they grew up. I don't care if they speak. I don't care any of that. Can they hoop? Are they good teammates? And we'll bring in translators. We'll culturally assimilate Luka to Dallas. We will do whatever we need to. Why? Because we are in the talent accumulation business. And we all know with our respective sports teams, baseball, we could do that as well, right? I know you like the Cardinals for some terrible reason, but it's the Cubbies, man. The Cubbies are the answer. But I think when we step back, that's what we're in the business for. You get more talent, you win, right? So, all right, I do want to ask you, speaking of talent, we got a lot of family-run businesses in our industry, folks who are listening, working with family members here. You work with your wife, as I have. What have you learned over the past 8 years or so of working with your wife in the business under pressure?
Oh my gosh. That she's just built different. And I say that in a very good way, very positive way. Like, my wife, Ebony, she's amazing. Working with her, and I always tell her, and I was very intentional because, of course, I had this vision, opportunity to start ConstructReach. And when I started, or when we started, right, Ebony was working. She had her job. She was working kind of outside of ConstructReach. And I always knew that I wanted us, and we talked about this earlier when we were dating. I mean, we always had a desire to do something significant together. And so I kind of kept those conversations in mind, but just listening to her, kind of what she wanted to do, what she had a passion for, which was leading, inspiring. She's always had a passion for young ladies, for young girls, being able to be that mentor or a tangible model for them. And so, I knew that she had the passion there. And then she's just always been a very gifted kind of business person. She has that business mind, high business acumen. And, when I went to her, I said, Ebony, for one, I can't do this without you. And it's not because you're my wife. It's because like you are so gifted and so good at what we need as an organization to where I don't see anybody else that I would want to fill this position other than you.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of affirmation and empowerment and intentionality with how I wanted to communicate us working together, because it was always a dream. But when it was time for it to become a reality, I wanted to make sure that first and foremost, I got a chance to affirm like her gifts, and that I've noticed what she was passionate about and what she was good at, and how I didn't just want her to do it with me, but I needed her because of what she brought to the table. And just watching her blossom, she serves as director of community relations and business development, and she does that extremely well. And so just to sit back and watch her lead, inspire and create and build, hey man, I've got a front row seat to something that's amazing. So yeah.
That's wonderful. You've got 40 plus episodes. You're coming up on 50 in the iReach podcast. What have you learned through that process of developing, starting it, maintaining it, and asking good questions to people that come on your show?
Yeah, no, very, very good question from host to host, right? I think, you learn a lot when you start to have a podcast. For one, it's work. It takes work, especially if you want to be successful at it and maintain it. But also, I think it goes back to something that we say, but you actually get a chance to really experience that when you have a podcast, is communication 101. Know your audience, but also know your guests, right? Like just being able to understand who's coming on, who's taking time out of their day to be a guest on your podcast, and then what questions, right, can you ask to put them in the best position to communicate what it is that they have to offer. And I think that's one of the things that you learn, and it also it takes a team, at times, depending on what scale you're doing it at as well. But you begin to communicate things and you begin to listen very well when you are asking the questions and when you are the host and you have people coming on to your show. And I think being able to do that on a week in and week out basis, where you have these different personalities, where you have different stories, and being able to have a theme as a podcast, but still have that individuality based on the guest, is something that you learn during this process. And so that's been one of the biggest things, is to make sure, even though we have a thematic theme, if you will, overarching theme with the iReach podcast, is still being able to value and elevate the individual. And that takes a lot of intentionality.
Yep. Awesome. Well, hey man, I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate you making time for me. I always know when you're running your own podcasts and then being a guest on somebody else's, you're like, hey, that's a trade-off I'm making to you. I need to make it in myself. So I appreciate you doing that. But really, with ConstructReach, what you're doing, I think it's critical. And we need the best minds we've got all across the country on the workforce issue. So appreciate what you're doing there. Can you do two things for me before we go? Can you make it really clear where if people are interested to talking to you about workforce development, your consultancy, and then also make a note, give a plug for your iReach podcast as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for having me on. ConstructReach, you can find us on all social media platforms. From an industry professional, of course, that could be LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or what have you. On our website at ConstructReach.com, there is a contact page. If you are interested in getting in contact with ConstructReach, you can fill out that form and we will follow up with you. Specifically, we help companies. We're a workforce development company, but We are a full suite consultancy. And so that could look like organizational health. That could look like formalizing an internship program. That could be executive professional development, community engagement, brand awareness, or a collection of all of those things. That is what we do, short and sweet. And so, yeah, if you are looking to get in contact with ConstructReach, you can find us there. Our iReach podcast is something that's available as well. You can find that on our website. Also, our ConstructReach community. Being able to build community is something that is very important for us. And so all of that is found on our website, or if you follow us on social media, you'll always see the iReach podcast. You will always see things that are pointing back to our ConstructReach community. We call it our CRC, where we're able to bring that younger talent and the industry into the same space for a lot of connection and opportunities to take place.
Awesome. Well, you just mentioned it. My wheels are turning right now. We have a couple different clients that have realized they have not done a good job either initiating or sustaining a internship program that is largely built around the expectations internally among the executive leaders about commitment, time, and how long it takes to build that pipeline where you're a trusted brand that students will want to work with you. So that certainly got my wheels turning here. So I'll look to follow up with you on that. Paul Robinson at ConstructReach. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Paul Robinson of ConstructReach. If you did enjoy this conversation, please share it with your network. And if I can ask for one small favor, please rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. That small little act helps us grow our audience as we strive to bring the construction community closer together so we can build safer, more enjoyably, and more profitably. Quick question for you. Did you know that we also twice a month put out a construction leadership newsletter? Did you know this? Are you interested in this? What are we doing there? What we're trying to do twice a month is share some of the writing, some of the tools, some of the insights that we are sharing to other clients and other friends in the industry to help you become a better leader. Full stop. We're not trying to waste your time. We're not trying to sell you stuff. What we are trying to do is make some of the best things that we have found on our own or developed for certain clients. We're trying to make those available to you. So twice a month, when we send these out to your email inbox, we are doing it trying to live up to our motto. You are owed nothing. Deliver value first. I am trying to deliver value every single time we send that out. So if you are interested, you can go to our website, bradleyhartmanandco.com. That's 2 N's in Hartman, bradleyhartmanandco.com, and scroll to the bottom of any page and you will see where you can simply put in your email and we will send this newsletter directly to you, joining several thousand other members of our construction community that are looking to improve. And if for whatever reason, and I'm going to work my ass off to make sure this doesn't happen, if for whatever reason you feel we do not deliver value in that construction leadership newsletter, you can unsubscribe with one click, but you can make sure I'm not going to send you something if I fully don't believe it is worth your time and attention. Again, that is the construction leadership newsletter, bradleyhartmanandco.com to sign up. All right, friends, that's all I got. We're going to close out like we always do with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.